Pesachas Kiddushin of Samach Tes finishes the third parak of the Masechta and begins the fourth. The end of the third, we begin the daf of the Mishnah, which discusses the topic of a mamzer trying to purify his lineage. How can he have children who are not mamzerim? Machlokas Tanaim on the subject, and how they each derive their opinion. Then we'll begin the fourth parak, which lists 10 types of yuchsin, and it begins the discussion with how they left Vavel at the end of the time between the two Batei Migdash and came to Eretz Yisrael, what percentage left, what percentage stayed behind, and how we know all of that from Sefer Nehemiah. Let's begin. We begin with the Mishnah, which discusses Machlokes Tanaim, whether a mamzer could ever have children that are not mamzer. Rabbi Tarfon says yes. Rabbi Tarfon says a mamzer who marries a shivcha will have children who are not mamzerim. So the isser for a mamzer to marry a Yisrael is only lo yove bekal. A shivcha is not called bekal, according to Rabbi Tarfon. Therefore, if a mamzer marries a shivcha, the Mishnah is not clear whether he's allowed to do l'chadchil or not, but if he does, the child will be an eved, because the yichus goes after his mother. In Nachem and Avadim, the genealogy follows the mother, and therefore if the mother is a shivcha, the child will be a shivcha and not a mamzer. And then if he's freed, becomes a meshucher, then he becomes a regular Yisrael, and he's not a mamzer. Rabbi Eliezer disagrees, doesn't clearly say why, he just says this is going to be an eved and a mamzer until he's freed, in which case he's just a mamzer, but it'll always be a mamzer. So the Gemara begins by asking, is Rabbi Tarfon saying you're allowed to do this lechatchila? The mamzer can go marry a shevcha, or he's not allowed to, but if he does, then it will accomplish purifying his lineage. So the Gemara tries a few proofs. The Gemara's first proof is that there's a Gemara that says, there's a brisa that says that they told Rabbi Tarfon, your solution only works for a male mamzer to purify his lineage. It doesn't work for a female mamzer. She can never have children who are not mamzerim. What is the difference between a male and a female? So the Gemara assumes that the male can go somewhere and hide and pretend he's a regular person and go marry a shivcha. But a female mamzeres can't go hide somewhere she's not. It's not the type for women to go traveling to a place where she's not known and to act on her own. That's not going to happen. She's going to have to stay in her community, and therefore everyone's going to know who she is and not allow her to marry an eved. That's what the Gemara assumes, which indicates that it's not allowed l'chadchila, and that's why she has to go hide if she wants to do it. And since she won't, this solution's not going to work. So again, there's your proof that this is only allowed to be the eved, but l'chadchila he can't go marry a mamzeres, and mamzer can't go marry a shivcha. So Gemara says, no, that's not the reason that there's a difference between a male mamzer and a female mamzeres. The reason that there's a difference is because the male mamzer who marries a shivcha, the child will follow his mother and be an eved, be an akum, and not be a mamzer because he's not part of Yisrael. However, a female mamzeres who marries an eved, the child will follow again his mother, but therefore he's following the mamzeres, and therefore the child will be a mamzer also, be a regular Yisrael and be a mamzer. It will not help. So the problem is not that he can't do l'chadchila, he could do l'chadchila. The problem is that the solution is not going to help even if you do it. Okay, next proof the Gemara brings from an incident that happened with Rabbi Simloi, who was staying in someone's house, and he said, and the person who was hosting him was a mamzer. So he said, if I would have recognized you earlier, I could have purified your descent, I could have given you a solution. Meaning the host was already married at the time. But he meant to say that I would have advised you to marry a shevcha, and then you would have been able to solve the problem. So Gemara says, if he's telling him, I could have purified you, obviously it's something you could do l'chatchila. You can't l'chatchila go advise, he wouldn't be able to advise him to go do a sin, and do something wrong. So obviously, Rabbi Tarfon holds that it's mutter, not just b'diavad. So Gemara says, no, maybe he was trying to tell him a different solution. Maybe he was trying to say, make yourself into an eved ivri. And an eved ivri is allowed to marry a shevcha kananis. So the way the Gemara phrases it is that he would have said to him, you can go steal. Rashi points out that that's also an avera. But Rashi says the Gemara could have just answered, go sell yourself as an eved. Either way, once he's an eved ivri, then he can go marry a shivcha l'chadchila according to everybody. And eved ivri, his master can give him a shivcha. That's explicit in the psukim in the beginning of Parshas Mishpatim. And then the child will be an eved Kanani. And if it's freed, then it'll be a non-mamzer Yisrael. So therefore, that was the solution that he wanted to give him. So the Gemara asks, there was no Eved Ivri in the days of Rabbi Samloi. Eved Ivri only existed in the times when there was Yovel, because the Eved goes free at Yovel. In the times of Rabbi Samloi, Yovel didn't happen anymore. So therefore, we'll have to go back to original proof, and this is a proof that Rabbi Tarfon did say l'chatchila. What he was suggesting was that he could marry a mamzeres, that this mamzer could marry a shechla kananis l'chatchila. Says the Gemara halacha l'maisa. Rabbi Yehuda says the name of Shmuel. The halacha is like Rabbi Tarfon. Now the Gemara wants to analyze Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. Why does he not agree? So the Gemara says he has a drasha from a pasuk. The pasuk says, Loy is an actual word loy. It says loy mamzer b'kal Hashem gamdar asiri loy b'kal Hashem. What's that loy? Says that's to teach me, even in the case of a mamzer who marries a shivcha, the psul of the mamzer stays. He's still loy. He follows loy. Someone says, what does Rabbi Tarfon, what do the Rabbanan, what do the other opinions do with that loy? Someone says, no, that's just to teach me that in a regular case of a Yisrael who marries a mamzeres, that the halacha follows the mother and the child is a mamzer, and not the father. You would have thought that the yichus of mamzer or non-mamzer follows the father because it says in mishpachaisam, the veisav the yichus follows the father. Therefore, you need this light to tell me that no, in that case it follows the mother. And Rabbi Eliezer, so he says exactly. If the word lay could override the mishpachaisam, the veisav to say that the yichus of mamzer follows the mother, follows the mamzer, whoever he is, mother or father, so then the same thing should apply in the case of a mamzer who marries a shifcha. The psul of mamzer still stays behind, even though it says now that generally the yichus follows the mother. Okay, we'll override that too with the word loy, and therefore the psul of mamzer will stick to him no matter what happens. Now, how do the Rabbanan respond to that argument? They say, no, it's not just the pasuk of Yishav Yeladah Tiyalad now that teaches me that an Eved follows the yichus of his mother. The zera of the father has no shaychus to the future genealogy and ancestry of the child of a shivcha. The shivcha is like livestock, and therefore it doesn't matter how she became pregnant. Her child is her own, and there is no other yichus. Okay, this concludes the third part of the Masechta. We now begin the fourth, which discusses 10 types of genealogy, 10 types of ancestry, 10 types of what we'll just call yuchsin. It came from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael together with Ezra when he left Bavel to come back to Eretz Yisrael to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. A lot of this is described in Sefer Ezra and in Sefer Nehemiah, that at the end of the Persian Empire, at the end of that is the Persian rule over Klal Yisrael. The Jews came back to Yerushalayim to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. They actually came in multiple waves. First was a wave of Talmidei Chachamim, Tzaddikim, and then later Ezra came with a vast group of psulim. And the Mishnah here describes how these psulim came to Eretz Yisrael, and it says that there were 10 types of yichus that came at that time. They are Kahanim, Levim, Yisraelim, Chalalim, those are Kahanim psulim that have the halachas of regular Yisraelim. Geirim, those are converts. Charurim is freed avadim. Mamzerim. Then you have Nisin, Shtuki, and Asufi. Nisin is the Givonim who were given a partial conversion and a bris milah in the times of Yeshua ben Nun, but David HaMelech made a gzeira against them that they have to remain separate. And then there's Shtuki and Asufi. Shtuki and Asufi, the Mishnah defines later. A Shtuki is one who knows who his mother is, but not who his father is. The Gemara explains that when he calls someone father, his mother will silence him and say shah. That's for the word shtika. That's why it's called a shtuki. And a sufi is one who is found in the street, as it were, or for whatever other reason is an abandoned orphan and doesn't know neither who his mother nor his father is, and therefore has no idea what kind of yichsin he has. The Mishnah notes that Abba Shal used to call a shtuki biduki. Now, what are the halachas of these 10 types? So the Mishnah divides it up into groups that can marry with each other. So Kahanim, Levim, Yisraelim, of course, are all ksherim. They're all allowed to marry into each other. If you take Kahanim out of the cheshbon, Levim, Yisraelim, Chalalim, Geirim, and Avadim Shecharim, Charuri, those are all ksherim also. They can't all marry Kahanim, but they can all marry each other. Kahanim can't marry, obviously, Chalalim, Geirim, or freed Avadim. That's from the halacha of Psul. The Chalalim is mafurish that it's also very kind to marry a chalal. Geirim and Meshacharim are considered to have the psul of Zaina, because we don't know what their behavior was before they converted or became Yisraelim. Now, as far as the psulim go, many of them are allowed to marry each other, including Safik psulim. So Mamzerim, Nesinim, Shtuki, and Asufi are all allowed to marry with each other. Even a Vadei Mamzer is only usher in a Vadei Yisrael. A Vadei Mamzer is allowed to marry a Safik Mamzer, and therefore a Shtuki. And in Asufi, that are both Safik Mamzerim, are allowed to marry a real Mamzer, as well as a Nisin, and each other. Okay, so let's begin the Gemara. That's the Mishnah. The Gemara says, it says 10 Yochsin came up from Baba. Why does he use the word come up? The Gemara says that the Mishnah teaches us, as a side note, that Eretz Yisrael is higher than all other lands. Not necessarily is meant to be understood literally, could be, but could also mean that if you hold the ball of the earth, Eretz Yisrael should be at the top, or that it is spiritually higher. But either way, the Gemara says Eretz Yisrael is higher than all other lands. And the we also know that the place of the Beis Hamikdash is higher than all other parts of Eretz Yisrael. So where do you see that? So when it comes to Bryce, it says, that's the proof that the Beis Hamikdash is higher than all of Eretz Yisrael, because it's teaching you that Eretz Yisrael, that it's referring to people living in Eretz Yisrael and saying you will go up. Kamtava Alisa, you go up to get to the place which Hashem chose, which is the Beis Hamikdash. And they know that Eretz Yisrael is higher than all the other lands. For that, the Gemara quotes a pasuk or a series of psukim in Sefer Yirmiyahu. It says, "L'chein hine yamim mebayim nam Hashem." Days are coming. Hashem speaks. L'yom ro'ed chai Hashem asher hela spinei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim. Won't only refer to the fact that Hashem brought Yisrael up from the land of Mitzrayim. Kim chai Hashem asher hela v'asher hevi ezera beis Yisrael me'eretz tzafayna mikol haratzis. Again, uses the term "bring up" from all of the lands. Tzafayna mikol haratzis asher hidachtim sham v'yashu al admasam. So bring up is the term that's used for any type of immigration to Eretz Yisrael, which will take place in the future time of the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, so that's why it says the term "go up." Now the Gemara wants to, why does it say it went up from Bavel? It should say it came up to Eretz Yisrael. Why the emphasis on the leaving of Bavel? So the Gemara says this is to teach me another thing, and that is when Ezra left Bavel in the second wave of departures, he took all of the psulim along with him and left the community there clean and pure as finely sifted flour. Now, the reason he did that is because he realized that all the Talmidei Chachamim were leaving or had left already, and the people that were left behind would not be able to paskin the halachos of Yuchsin. Therefore, in order to avoid confusion and to avoid psulim getting mixed in with the ksherim, he took all of psulim along with him to Eretz Yisrael, where the Sanhedrin was and where he would be able to paskin, and therefore he brought them along. And therefore, what ended up happening was that Eretz Yisrael was left with a mixture of people, and the psulim were there. While Bavel was clean, there were no psulim there. Now, the Gemara says there's a machlekes Abaye and Rava if he had to force them to come, or if he just separated. And once they were identified as psulim, they couldn't stay in Bavel anymore because no one wanted to marry them because they were identified as psulim, and therefore they went on their own. So again, Abaye says they went up on their own. Ezra just identified them, and being isolated, they left and came to Eretz Yisrael with him. Rava said he actually forced them to come. He used whatever terms of pressure he had to say that you guys are coming with me. Now, we have a brisa where Rabbi Elazar says that Ezra purified the Bavel community like fine flour. So we could either explain that Abaye and Rava are arguing over whether that is correct, whether Ezra really purified them, or we could say that they both agree that he purified them. The question just is, did he separate them and they came on their own, or he forced them to come? The Gemara now brings two potential rayas that they came up on their own. First is Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel, who says that all lands are considered to be mixed like a dough compared to Eretz Yisrael, meaning Eretz Yisrael is purer than them. But Eretz Yisrael is considered to be mixed like the dough in relation to Bavel, meaning that the order of purity is as follows. The most pure land is Bavel, now be because Ezra took all the psulim away. Next level of purity, but far below that, is Eretz Yisrael, and then even below that is the rest of the lands. Now, why would Eretz Yisrael be less pure than Bavel? If Ezra took all the psulim with him, forced them to come, that means he knew who they were and he kept their identities clear and he brought them with him. So then they would be held separate even in Eretz Yisrael. Why would we say that Eretz Yisrael is less pure than Bavel? So the Gemara answers, the proof is therefore that they must have gone up on their own, and therefore we weren't tracking who's who when they arrived. So the Gemara says, no, it's not correct. It could really be that they were forced to come up, and in the first generation, when they first arrived, they really were identified, but then things slipped, and they became loose there, and therefore they're not, although they're not as bad as the other lands in Eretz Yisrael, it's not as clear as in Bavel, where there are no psulim at all. The Gemara's second proof is we have a pasuk in Sefer Ezra describing the trip, and he says he looked for kahanim, and there were no kahanim there. So it says, "Ve'ekbet seim al hanar," I gathered them all to the river. Haba el ahava v'nachna sham yam shleisha v'avinu ba'am. It says we spent 3 days there, and I looked into the people. Ba'kahanim u'imnei Levi le'misasi sham. I couldn't find any kahanim or any Leviim. So what does it mean? He looked there and he discussed. He started to search then on the way and he found there were no Kahanim, there were no Levim there, if he forced them to come, that means he knew who they were. He brought the Psulim. So why would we think that he was looking, why would he be searching for anyone else at that point? Someone says, no, he looked for Psulim. But Kahanim and Levim, he didn't know of those Kshem that he brought, who were Kahanim and who were Levim, he wasn't tracking that. Okay, we want to refer back to the Mishnah to look for sources for each part. So first of all, said Kahanim, Levim, and Yisraelim came. How do we know that? More quotes a pasuk again in Sefer Ezra, where it says, "Vayeshu Kahanim Levim umin ha'am hamashirim v'hasha'arim v'hanesinim bareim v'chol Yisrael bareim." So it mentions Kahanim, Levim, and the rest of Yisrael, different types of Levim, Mashirim and Sha'arim, even Nesinim, and says they all settled in the cities that they had. So it clearly mentions their Kahanim, Levim, and Yisrael arriving. Okay, next it says Chalali Gerin Charuri. So how do you know that Chalalim came with Ezra to Eretz Yisrael? So this is going to be a lengthy derivation. More quotes of Brisa, relating how when they came in the first wave, they tried to identify the Kahanim there, and they made them each come up with a Shtar Yuchsid. Any family of Kahanim needed to document their ancestry to prove that they were Kahanim. There were three families called the families of Chavia, Hakait, and Barzilai that were not able to document it, and therefore they were ruled that they cannot eat karbonis, but they can eat truma. So Mark wants the pasuk. This one is from Sefer Ezra as well. It says Umibnei Kahana bnei Chavia bnei Hakait bnei Barzilai Shalakach Umibnei Barzilai Hagaladi Isha ve'Yikari al Shemam. So these Eila Bikshu Ksavam HaMisyachsim, they looked for their Shtar Yichos. So they couldn't find Kahuna. They were sent out of the Kahuna. Tirshasa is Nehemiah. Tirshasa said to them, they cannot eat karbanos until Mashiach comes, and there's a kohen who wears the Urim and Tumim. So he said to them, however, you are in your previous chazaka. When you were in Chutzars, in Bavel, you were allowed to eat kachei gvul, means you were allowed to eat truma. So now you're also allowed to eat truma. You're allowed to eat kachei gvul. However, you can't eat karbanos. So now the Gemara has a few questions here before we get to the proof. First of all, there's a halacha that if you see somebody eating truma, you could assume that he's a kohen, and you could assume that he's a kosher kohen, and marry him b'cheskas kashrus. So if they were allowed to eat truma, so they should be able to be assumed to be kosher kohanim. How could we let them eat truma if their yichus was not established? Now, that's a machlokes. Do we assume what's called mala mitruma lichsin? We assume that a person is kosher for yichsin if he's eating truma. So how are they allowed to eat truma here? Wouldn't people come to assume that they were kosher kohanim and marry them? Whereas no, since they weren't eating karbanos, people understood that they were different and they were careful with them. So now they want to know, what is the meaning of gedola chazaka that the Brisa said? Gedola chazaka, how great is chazaka that they were able to keep eating truma? What is the significance? It didn't give them any halachas. They had the same halachas they had before. What is chazaka helping them over here? So the Gemara has two ways of answering this. First approach is to say, in the Chutzlatz, they were only allowed to eat truma d'Rabbanan. That is truma of Chutzlatz. However, here, in Eretz Yisrael, now there's truma d'Oraisa, they're still allowed to eat that. The Gemara's second answer is to say, no, really, even now they're only allowed to eat truma d'Rabbanan. And that actually explains why there's no problem of assuming yuchsin, because they weren't allowed to eat truma d'Oraisa. Even in Eretz Yisrael, they were only being allowed to eat truma d'Rabbanan, and you can't make any yuchsin mistakes based on that. I ask a question, what is chazaka helping them? They had the same halacha there. Gemara says, yeah, because over there was no need to make a gzeira. If you allowed them to eat truma d'Rabbanan, they may come to end up eating truma d'Oraisa, because there was no truma d'Oraisa at Chutz La'aretz. Here, though, they're in Eretz Yisrael, there's truma d'Oraisa all over the place. You may think make gzeira, don't allow them to eat truma d'Rabbanan, because they may end up eating truma d'Oraisa. On that, we answer no, because there's a chazaka, and they had that chazaka previously, so they're allowed to keep eating it, even though the gzeira should still exist. And therefore, you see the concept of chazaka. Now, the Gemara says, how could you say that they're only allowed to eat truma d'Rabbanan here? It says that Hatirshasa said to them that they should not eat Kiddush HaKadoshim, which is karbanos. That means all types of truma they're allowed to eat, even just regular Kiddush, which is truma d'Oraisa. So he says, no, he wasn't saying to them Kiddush HaKadoshim. He was talking about Kiddush and Kachim. Kiddush is truma, only truma d'Rabbanan. Kachim is talking about karbanos. Karbanos are called Kachim. Where do you see that truma is called kodesh? It says kodesh. Where do you see that kachim is a word for karban? It says baskan kisei lezar he betrumas kachim loisaychel. And that refers to bamurim and a kachim, the parts taken from kachim. All right, so that's the tzugya there. As far as we're concerned, you see from here that chalalim came together with the rest of the group to Eretz Yisrael because these three families had the halacha of chalalim. Although they were allowed to eat truma, they were not allowed to eat karbonos and did not have status of full kahanim.